Welcome to You, Me, Empathy. Thank you for listening. We would like to remind you that this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Known as just a silly boy with a feely heart. Please consider supporting the show. Check us out on Patreon or simply leave a review on iTunes. Here's your host and creator of the show, Known Wells.
Hello, Feely Humans. Welcome to another episode of You, Me, Empathy. This is episode 110 on eating disorder recovery with my guest, Kristen Brunello, who is an eating disorder recovery coach. In this episode, we talk about Kristen's past history with anorexia. We talk about perfectionism. We talk about Kristen's experience at the Renfrew Center, an eating disorder treatment center in Philadelphia, relapses, art therapy, DBT, yoga, all of the above. So many things. Kristen is great, and I think you'll enjoy this episode. There is a trigger warning. We talk about eating disorders, if that wasn't obvious, and so there's some sensitive stuff in there. If you're someone who's in maybe early recovery or active eating disorder right now, so if that's the case, then just be fair warned. We don't get into too much detail, but just wanted to throw that out there. Before we get to this episode, though, I wanted to remind you, today is January 6th, and on January 15th, January 15th, it's a Wednesday, that is the crowdfunding campaign launch for the Feely Human Collective. I am so excited. It's 9 days away, which is amazing, and I'm very nervous and also feeling like it's all going to fail. And that's just my self-limiting and self-hating sort of side of my personality coming through. And I just got to believe in the mission. And so if you have a calendar, mark your calendars for January 15th. And if you haven't joined the launch team, go to feelyhuman.co and check that out. I really recommend you do that, and make sure to follow Feely Human on the socials at Feely Human, and support the campaign when it comes out. That would be amazing. Please, I would love you forever. There's lots of great goodies and reward tiers with stickers and pins and t-shirts and even a day with me. Wouldn't that be great? We can hold hands, we can skip, we can snuggle dogs, we can record an episode of the podcast, whatever. So look forward to that. January 15th. Really, truly, I need your support. That would be wonderful. And speaking of support, if you haven't left a review for You, Me, Empathy in iTunes, what are you doing with your life? I'm just kidding. I love you. You're doing amazing things with your life. But if you could do one more amazing thing, make sure you leave a 5-star review for You, Me, Empathy in iTunes. It really helps out the show, gets more ear holes on all this empathy jam that we love. Okay. Are you ready for it? Let's do it. Let's get to episode 110 on eating disorder recovery with Kristen Brunello. Welcome to You, Me, Empathy, a podcast about exploring the struggles we face in our day-to-day lives as humans trying to get by on this wondrous and overwhelming pale blue dot. The intent of You, Me, Empathy is to talk openly, without judgment, about our mental health, our neuroses, our shared anxieties and worries, to create a dialogue that is vulnerable and deeply human and empathetic. and to share that dialogue with others to inspire emotional and cognitive collaboration and insight so we can, hand in hand, break down the stigma that make us feel shame and guilt for struggling, for feeling our feelings, for being feely humans. Yumi Empathy is a safe, friendly space designed to inspire the beauty in each of us. Today, I'm so happy to always be a being with yoga teacher, podcaster, and eating disorder recovery coach, Kristen Brunello. Hello, Kristen.
Hi, how's it going?
It's going all right. How are you?
Pretty good.
Good to hear. I'm so happy to have you on the show.
Yeah, this is exciting. I'm happy to be here.
Good. That's great to hear. I haven't had a eating disorder recovery coach on the show, so I'm excited about that.
Mm-hmm. It's sort of I don't want to say it's like an up and coming field, but I think that like sober coaches in the area of drugs and alcohol have been around for a bit, and it's newly being translated into the eating disorder realm. So I don't think that there's like a ton of us yet, but I think there will be more, and there's a couple of training programs out there, specifically to train people to be eating disorder recovery coaches. So
awesome.
I think hopefully more and more will start to pop up because I think it can be really helpful.
Yeah, I think it's really neat, and I'm deeply curious about sort of how you got there and what the sort of learning process is and the sort of certification process is, and we'll get into that a bit later. But before we do that, before we get to know you a bit, Kristen, we always start the show with an emotional check-in. How's your week been, and how are you feeling right now in this moment?
My week's been pretty good. It's been like kind of status quo. I actually also just recently opened a yoga studio like a little less than 4 months ago. So right now that's taking up a ton of my time and focus and attention. And I'm finding that my emotions are sort of linked to how well the studio does this week. But right now I'm feeling pretty good. I had a kind of a fun week. I went into New York City, saw Wicked on Broadway the other night, which was cool.
Oh, I love Wicked.
Yeah, one of our yoga students is actually Glinda on Broadway right now. So I went in to see her be one of the leads on Broadway, and it was really awesome. And then in this moment right now, I'm feeling pretty good. It's really nice out, which is awesome, affects my mood in a good way. And that's that. Yeah, I'm feeling good.
Awesome. Well, good to hear. Yeah. Starting your own yoga studio, that's a
chaos.
That's a big undertaking. How has that process been?
Good. I've managed other people's fitness facilities before. I managed a fitness club for about 3 years. I managed another person's yoga studio for about 2 years. I managed a pretty big apartment building for a year. So, I have a lot of the skills that I need.
Yeah.
It's different when it's your own money.
Right.
But it's definitely been enjoyable and stressful at the same time.
Sure. And how is it? How is it go? Like, are you doing okay? Are you getting people in there? How's that going?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't have anything to really compare it to. So when people ask me that question, it's really hard for me to say because everything else I've managed has already been established once I've taken it over. Like I haven't built it from the ground up. So, but people are coming to classes, not as many as I need, but some are definitely coming. I'm not making enough money yet. But I am making some. So it's just like, I think we're going the way that we need to be going. Summer in New Jersey for fitness facilities tends to get really slow. So I know that I'm entering the slow season, which is a little bit scary because people go away, they go to the beach, they go to upstate New York, people go on vacations and stuff. So I don't know what the summer is going to look like. But the first year is just going to be like a giant experiment. It's kind of the way that I'm viewing it right now. It's just a huge experiment.
I think that's very smart. I think with I've never run a business, but I'm actually working on a business idea right now and talking to various people in business and people who've started businesses. And that's pretty standard the first year or two, really, to be kind of an experiment, to be kind of exploratory and just kind of figure it out.
Yeah, seeing what works, what doesn't work. Always it being a business, like an actual established LLC business, but it's not a brick and mortar, so the overhead costs are a lot less of an online business. So for me, it's just like the costs of running an actual location and rent and utilities and like business insurance, all of these things. It's just a different experience. But it's also really nice to have like a home base and a place to go to every day that I built out, and it looks the way that I like, and it smells the way that I like. And so it's fun. It's just, it's new. So it's stressful, and money is stressful sometimes. So
money is stressful. It's,
right.
I often say and wonder, why do we even need money? Like, it's just like, why? Yeah, obviously that's ridiculous. But I'm a bit of a utopian sort of worldview type of guy. But yeah, I hear you. Well, it's really commendable for starting that. I think it's really neat, and I wish you all the success in the world.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. This week, my dear sweet brother Tannen, who was on this podcast talking about his relationship with schizophrenia, I hadn't seen him in about a month or so, and we got to go for a walk and chat this week, and that always kind of fills me up, and I love it because he's been struggling to kind of get out of the house and find the motivation to get out of the house. I think he struggles just with still kind of seeing things and sort of the paranoia, and I think it's easier on him when he's in the house, but for his own sort of mental health, I think it's good for him to get out every once in a while. So we did that. He got out and we met and we went for a walk, and it was lovely. So that kind of fueled my heart this week.
Oh, good. Yeah. It's always nice to spend time with, that's like my favorite thing to do, is just spend time with, there's a handful of people that, like, if I can spend a couple hours with them, like, I feel awesome.
I love that, because it is like, for me, I'm the same way. I'm an introvert. So I definitely need my kind of alone time to recharge, but I'm also filled up and recharged by interesting conversations, and then just people who see me and connect with me and care about me, and vice versa, like that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm 100% an introvert too, like very introverted, but I find that there's a couple of people in my life that, like, it doesn't drain me to be around them, because I know I don't have to try to be anything. We don't even have to talk, but it's nice to just like be in their presence and still be able to recharge. But that it's not that many people that I feel like that with. We're talking about like half of a handful of people potentially.
Yeah, I hear that. I can relate to that, because it's we work as humans. I mean, I'll just put this on myself. I work as a human to try to show up and be my true self, right? In all facets of life. But that's hard. That's hard work sometimes. And I think when we have kind of those safe spaces where we don't have to put on a face or align with some sort of, I don't know, proper way to live in the world, these cultural norms or whatever, if we can show up and just be ourselves with people, like that is a freeing, relieving feeling. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Kristen, let's get into your story. So cool. I'm deeply curious about your sort of journey from early signs of eating disorder, and then now you're eating disorder recovery coach. Like that's kind of a beautiful journey.
Yeah.
Something I'm deeply interested in. But I do want to ask you about, I kind of ask on the show what the seminal moments of my guests are like. And by that, I mean, when you look back at your life and you think about sort of, you're looking through the lens of the type of person you are now and who you are now and what you are passionate about now, like, Are there any moments that kind of stick out to you as being important and kind of just memorable moments in your own sort of mental health journey? And not specific, doesn't have to be specifically related to mental health, just kind of moments that stick out as being identity shaping and identity shifting.
Mm-hmm.
Can you mention maybe a couple of moments?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know if this is going to answer your question exactly, but I think that I've always been a quiet person, which I think people mistake for shy. I'm not actually shy like at all. I'm just a quiet introvert.
I got that all the time.
And yeah, and even still I get that that people think I'm shy or stuck up or whatever because I'm just a quiet observer. And I think that I've always been very mature for my age. You know, I've definitely been described as having an old soul. Most of my friends are about 10 years older than me, and it's just who I get along with better. And I think when I was younger, that was hard because I never felt like I fit in with like people my age, right? So like I went to a really small, I mean, I think it's a really small school, but I had like 140 kids in my graduating class, which I guess for where I live in New Jersey is small, but for other areas of the country might not actually be that small.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the same people, you know, from like start to finish, from kindergarten to 12th grade. And I think I never totally felt like I fit in. I had friends, but I always sort of felt like an outcast or like an outsider, or I used to feel like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be a human being. Like I just didn't get people. And I think it was mostly because of this nature of that I've accepted with myself now that I am a quiet, observant introvert. And I'm not a silly person. And so like when you're younger and like everybody's silly and I just wasn't even back then, even my mom was like, you were just you've been serious since the moment you were born. So I think I always sort of felt like I didn't 100% fit in. And I grew up with some like anger and addiction in my household. And I think that made me even maybe a little bit more quieter and trepidatious and hesitant because there was some fear involved.
Yeah.
And I say that because I do think that sort of shaped a little bit how I am today, because I do think that that can be my tendency, though I'm a lot less like that now. But I feel like all of that, like they talk about the development of, I can just really speak about eating disorders because that's all I've ever been really treated with. But like the biopsychosocial model, like there's a biological component. Like I probably was sort of predisposed to an addictive personality because addiction runs in my family. Biopsycho, like I don't exactly know, but in terms of like nature versus nurture and all of that, like I think that my household probably helped the development of the eating disorder just because of anxiety and stuff like that, and living with a little bit more fear. Though I do want to say that right now my relationship with my family is amazing, and everything is totally resolved itself now that I'm 32. You know, It got a lot better. But when I was younger, you know, it was not yet. And so I feel like that contributed to the development of my eating disorder. And I would say like the first signs of it probably showed up when I was 12. Like I can remember being in the lunchroom, and I'm one of those people where if I'm upset, I lose my appetite. You know, I find that there's kind of two different types, right? Like some people like emotionally eat and I emotionally didn't eat. And I think originally I was just a stressed out, upset, I'm very empathetic. I'm very feely. Like I was going through a hard time. And so I wasn't eating a lot. And then I realized like, oh, I was getting attention for not eating, you know, and all I wanted to do was feel included. So, you know, when I was sitting at my lunch table and I wasn't eating and suddenly like people were like, are you okay? Like, why aren't you eating? Where's your lunch? Like I felt like, oh, people actually care about me. And I think that started to plant the seeds of eating disorder.
Yeah.
Because I do think a lot of people are like eating disorders aren't for attention. And like, and I think largely that's true. I mean, true to an extent, especially when it really becomes like a compulsion. But I think in the beginning for me, I liked the attention that I was getting from people that I felt like I wasn't included with because I wasn't eating lunch every day. And I think that is kind of like a poignant part in my journey, because that's when I remember being like the first signs of it showing up.
Right.
And I was just I was a depressed kid. My parents would say the same exact thing. Like I was depressed as a child. I was depressed as a middle schooler. I was depressed as a high schooler. I was depressed as a college student. Like I feel like depression and anxiety were not depression and anxiety, depression and anorexia were really the two things that I struggled with the most. But it sort of went away. Like it took a back seat in high school. I joined the volleyball team. Like I was doing really well academically. I had friends. Like I was feeling better. So the eating stuff went away until I went to college. And then it started to come back again. A really huge part, I think, in my eating disorder journey in particular was the death of my grandmother. It's weird that it affected me so much because like she and I were close, but we weren't like people are always like, oh, you must have been really close to her when I tell this story. And like we were, but not like, we weren't like really, really close. It's not like she raised me. Like we saw her every once in a while. Like we did holidays there, but it wasn't like we were incredibly close. But she got sick. And for some reason that really affected me. She had brain cancer. And when she died, like they knew she was dying. And so they called like the whole family to the hospital. And so we were all there when she took her last breath. We were there when she stopped breathing. We were there when the doctor came in and used the term, quote unquote, that she expired. Like, and that for me, like, I think was very traumatic.
How old were you at that time?
I was a freshman in college, I think.
Okay. So
19, probably.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, the eating stuff got really bad. And I just really wasn't eating. And again, it was less about, it wasn't about losing weight right away for my eating disorder. It was more about, I was really upset. So I wasn't eating, but then people were noticing and I was liking the attention. And that sort of became the chain. And then it was like, oh, and I'm losing weight. And then I liked that, and then it became sort of full-blown eating disorder of like body image stuff, all of the other symptoms that come around with anorexia. Then it became really like less about the attention and more about like the fear of food and the fear of calories and the counting of the calories and the constant weighing myself and trying to get to the lowest weight. Like then it became like I have anorexia.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was curious, there's a lot there to unpack. I very much relate to the feeling sort of early on, especially in school and even through college myself, like not feeling like I could fit in. Like did you look back at that time and that's sort of the feeling you have now? Or did you feel like you didn't fit in even as early as, 12?
When I was 12, I definitely felt like I didn't fit in.
Mm-hmm.
Now I think like being able to look back at it, like I did have friends, but I think that I had a lot of stuff going on at home and I was quiet, mature, and serious, and I didn't understand people my age. Even now, like when I'm like with a silly 5-year-old, I'm like, I just don't understand you. Like I don't get along with like, it's just not how I am. And I think that, but I do think that was a very present feeling for me, as early as like 4th grade, I could remember feeling that.
I mean, that must have been very isolating. I mean, because you're right, like kids are silly billies, that's what they do. And to feel not engaged with that or like that it's not a part of your sort of core person. Yeah, that has to have been sort of very isolating.
It was like emotionally, but outwardly I had friends, you know, like it's not like I wasn't invited places. I was invited to birthday. I mean, I wasn't outwardly, you wouldn't have thought that, but internally I always felt like I almost like I always say like I almost felt like I wasn't meant to be a human being. And it's interesting because I went to an astrologist once who was like, in your past life she didn't say an alien, but she said like you weren't actually of this earth. And I was like, that makes so much sense to me. Like I don't get it. Just don't get how people do things. But to answer your question, like I did feel like that throughout my life. It's not like looking back now. It was like, no, I definitely felt I did not belong.
Yeah. Well, the emotional isolation piece, I think, is the hardest one to
Sure.
cope with, to deal with. What did you do early on when you felt that? Like, how did you process and cope with that?
I mean, I didn't really. I mean, I was just a depressed kid. I don't know that when I was really young, like, I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
I don't really think I really did process it, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why an eating disorder ended up developing, because it wasn't like I wasn't able to process it, because at the time my home life was tumultuous. So it's not like I felt comfortable going home and talking about it.
Right.
So I really did internalize it. And, I did things at a young age that, like, you don't think people at a young age do. Like, I remember walking across the street with my eyes closed in 4th grade, like hoping that a car would hit me.
Wow.
Like, young, that, like, you would never think, like, oh, a 4th grader would think that. You're not even 10 yet. You're like 8. I mean, you're younger. I actually have no idea how old you are at 4th grade, but 8-ish, 10, I don't know. But I don't think I processed it. It came out in, like, things like that. But I've always been an internalizer, know, so it wasn't, I didn't act out. I didn't rebel. Like, it was just always, I was turning it against myself, but I don't think I really knew how to do that until the eating disorder started to show signs.
Did you do okay in school early on?
Yeah, I did really well in school. Like, my grades were always really good. I'm a smart person. I'm a book smart person. And so I always did well in school. But I do think that the teachers, like, especially in the middle school, I know teachers noticed, because I know that, like, I remember, like, vividly, like, the music teacher used to ask me to eat lunch with her. Like, I know that teachers definitely noticed. And I think my parents noticed in middle school too. But academically, I did really well. And I think that, that's part of, like, I think that's part of, like, a lot of people with anorexia do well in school. Like, I was a studier. I always studied. I did things in advance. I was super organized. Like, it was not okay to not get an A. I've always been a perfectionist like that. And academically, I did really well because of that.
Interesting. So you're almost equating, not fully, but, like, there's a sort of overlap there with perfectionism and anorexia.
I think so. I mean, at least for me, I really can only speak for myself, but
Right.
A lot of the people that I've interviewed on my podcast that would say that their eating disorder primarily showed up as anorexia, I've found are similar. It's this, like, strive for perfection, not just anatomically, like with your body, but also before that even started presenting itself. It's like the strive for straight A's, being really hard on myself. Again, I was super organized and meticulous. Like, to me, that's how my anorexia felt too. It was like a strive for lowering my weight. My meals were super organized and meticulous. Like, I counted everything. Like, it felt very equated. To me, it's part of my personality. I think that's part of my personality is to be like, I mean, I've gotten a lot less like that as I've gotten older, but I do think that still lives inside of me. This person that, like, wants to do really well and is very organized. And it's why I'm a good manager, why people want me to manage their businesses, because things don't fall through the cracks. And I'm a great employee. And I think a lot of what I do as a recovery coach is, like, help people see that each personality trait really has a light side and a dark side, and the dark side of my perfectionism, I think, showed up as anorexia, but a light side of my perfectionism is that people want to hire me because I'm a really good employee. And I think it helps me run a business well, but to me, the mentality feels very similar.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I as someone who has had anorexia myself, I've never been a perfectionist myself. Like, it was never about that, which is, but I can see the parallels. I can see how that would be the case for sure. Tell me, like, you said you had a pretty tumultuous sort of home. Like what, and you felt maybe unsafe or not able to kind of open up and talk about the stuff. Like, did you ever talk to your parents about it? Like, did they ever reach out to you? Like, what was going on with that?
About like my depression and stuff?
Yeah, like seeing that, their daughter maybe was isolated, the daughter was maybe depressed, etc.
They definitely have noticed it. For most of my middle school years, and I guess into high school too, I was part of an organization called the Willow Tree Teen Institute. And it was a camp that would happen over Teachers Convention, which is like a 4-day weekend in November in New Jersey where schools are closed. And it was primarily a camp for kids that was like promoting like getting high on life. Like it was like anti-drugs and alcohol, and it was trying to get kids not to do those things. And
sure.
I went when I was in 5th or 6th grade. I was chosen to go. Like I think they tried to get the kid, like I don't know how they chose me, but I was chosen to go as part of my school. I went. I really enjoyed it. So I went back as a counselor and I ended up being involved with it for a really long time. And the reason I know my parents noticed was because I remember my dad called the woman that ran the camp who I had a good relationship with, and he had her call me because she was a social worker to try to talk to me a little bit, So I think my parents kind of could tell that they weren't the ones that I was going to talk to about this with, but I know that they noticed because I remember that conversation with this woman.
Yeah. Well, that's a great effort by your parents,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think it's hard for kids to talk to their parents about stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it was hard for me. I mean, obviously at that age, like it's hard to talk about anything really because it's all so confusing.
Totally. And like for me, there was like my dad, until I was about maybe at 10 or 11, he was abusing alcohol, and then he got sober. And then he became very, very religious. And so it was hard for me to talk to my parents about it because it was like they were part of the reason I was like this, So I wasn't going to turn around and be like, hey, Dad, I didn't have the words to be like, when you get really angry because I won't go to church, it makes me feel like that. It's like I just didn't feel like they were an option to talk to. But I do think that they knew something was wrong because they did call this woman and have her call me and kind of went like the long way around.
Yeah. Well, I'll jump to I'm curious about sort of like your relationship with your parents now. You mentioned you have a good relationship, but I'm curious how you got there.
I think there was a little bit of a turning point. I live in northern New Jersey, which is pretty close to New York City. And so I was a freshman in high school when the attacks on the World Trade Center happened. And when you lived really close to New York City, like people in my school had parents that worked there. It's like that day I'll never forget for the rest of my life. Like I could tell you exactly what was happening when that happened because we were so close.
Right.
You could see the smoke in certain areas by where I live. You could notice that, the towers aren't there anymore because you used to be able to see them. And that day, I think triggered something in my dad at the time too. And it got very I just feel like there was an explosion in my house that day. And I think I can't really say what was going on for him, but it was just messy. It was just a messy day in my house. And I didn't know anybody that had been there, but I think it was a scary time. And I don't think any of us knew what to do with it. And my dad and my relationship got worse that day. And I actually ended up leaving. And I think I ended up after school that day, I went and stayed with my cousin for a week because I didn't really want to go back home. And he and I ended up really not having, I just wouldn't really talk to him for a lot of my high school. It was bad. And when I went to college, I think it started to get better. I also think he started to realize if he didn't let up a little bit on pushing his religion onto me, we weren't really going to have a relationship. So he's still very religious, but he experiences it.
What's his religion?
he's like an evangelical Christian. We were
Okay.
raised Presbyterian, but when he got sober, he changed churches. And I think the space for me going to college made a really big difference. But when I was, I ended up having to go to rehab twice for my eating disorder. And the first time we had to do family therapy. And I think that helped a lot, as torturous as family therapy was. Like, I despised it. I do think that it made a really big difference. And honestly, I think that me in being in recovery from my eating disorder gave me a new understanding, or like patience. And those aren't really the words that I want, but I can't think of it. But for what my dad went through when he was trying to get sober.
Yeah.
So I actually can see, I think my dad and I are very, very similar people. And I think we express ourselves, like, I think we both have bad tempers. His is more outward, mine's more inward, but I think that we both have bad tempers. I think we're both prone to addiction. I think all we want to do is help people, and he got sober through religion. I think that my yoga practice and the yoga philosophy really helped me heal from my eating disorder. And so I think the older I get, I realize the more like him I am. And he did his best. And I can see that now when I was growing up. Like, he really did his best with the tools that he had. And now he's been sober for a long time, and I've been better from my eating disorder for a long time. And our relationship's great now. He's an amazing father. He helped me so much with this yoga studio and like getting it ready. And he supports every decision I make, even when it's like leaving a really good paying job to try to be a full-time eating disorder recovery coach.
Wow.
He's amazing now,
That's
but
awesome.
it definitely we did not always have this relationship, but we have a really good relationship now.
Yeah, I'm so happy to hear that. Well, what strikes me as very inspiring and sort of something I hear a lot of, and it makes sense, is like when you were, like, I know that, like, for when I was in sort of like the early stages of recovery and sort of starting to do the work of like figuring out what the hell was going on emotionally. Like, it allowed me, I mean, not in that moment, but later, after I did that work, it allowed me to look back, right? Like, that's the goal, ultimately, is to look back and see how our paths have informed who we are today and our experiences. And I find that it allows us to develop greater empathy for the others that we've had in our lives throughout the years.
Totally, for sure.
Yeah.
Even if you decide like they're still not going to be in your life, it doesn't mean like everybody needs to forgive and forget.
Right.
But still being able to look back and be like, look, I can see how that happened, like why that happened, why they were like that. I think when they talk about like forgiveness is for you more so than the other person, like I still think even if you decide this person's never going to be in my life again, there's still the ability to look back, understand that, and maybe at least resolve something within yourself about the way that you feel about certain things that have happened in your life.
100%. I'm actually working on that with my therapist right now. Like, because I don't have a relationship with my father. It's like a boundary that I needed to create, and it's been wonderful for me. But I do see him, maybe once or twice a year at siblings' birthdays, siblings' kids' birthdays. And it's always been so anxiety fueled. But recently I had a conversation with my therapist where she said, I have to hold two truths in me. One truth is recognizing that, like, yes, the things that he did are not right. And you can hold that truth. And the other truth being, like, you don't need to allow it to affect you. Like, the truth is, like, the lie that I tell myself, Kristen, is like, if I go and see him and say hello, shake his hand or whatever, acknowledge his existence, that I'm somehow giving in to him, that I'm somehow like forgiving him or whatever it may be, that somehow like I'm giving in to his will. But the truth is that's not the case. Like, I can hold the truth of like, it's not right. And also just say, hey, hello, you're a person.
Right. Yeah. One thing, my yoga practice, and beyond just like rolling out a yoga mat and doing a bunch of yoga postures, but just like the things that I learned from yoga helped me a lot with that. And my main yoga mentor, her name's Kobe, always talks about like you get to choose your own reality, right? Like you can have the reality that he's a terrible person, and if I shake his hand, I'm giving in to him. And you can also choose the reality that like, I'm just going to shake his hand and be done with it. But she always says like freedom's an inside job, right? And if you shake his hand and now you're miserable, it's like you actually could choose not to be miserable in that moment. Doesn't mean you're forgiving him, doesn't mean you're going to invite him to Sunday dinner. But you could let it not take you down the rabbit hole of your past,
Totally. No, I love that. Freedom is an inside job. That's great. Mm-hmm. So when you go off to college, your eating disorder becomes a bit more serious. Tell me about like what that looked like for you.
Yeah. So it was really, I think it was like part of it was like, I don't want to gain the freshman 15. So I was like trying to be smart with my food choices, not really knowing what that looked like. But then once my grandmother passed away, it became just like I'm eating as little as I can. And it became, I'm going to weigh myself as much as I can. And I need my weight to be lower every time I step on that scale. And I just became very, very restrictive with my food. And that was mainly it in the beginning. Before I went to Renfrew, which is the rehab that I was in the first time, it was very much only anorexia. And I was so depressed that it wasn't even like the second time I went to Renfrew, it was very much like tracking my calories, trying to stay below a certain amount. I was purging. I was I felt very out of control. Whereas like the first time I went to Renfrew, I was so incredibly depressed. I wasn't eating. I was weighing myself a lot, but it was like it almost didn't feel like I had to work at the eating disorder. It was just, I was so depressed that I wasn't eating anymore. And because of that, I lost a lot of weight and I was no longer like medically stable. Mm-hmm. So I had to leave college to go into treatment. But it felt a lot less on purpose. Whereas the second time felt very like I'm having an eating disorder now and I'm counting calories and I'm purging if I eat something I'm not okay with, and I'm trying to get my weight really low, and I'm going to exercise if I like. There's a lot of compensating, and It became a lot more of what I think eating disorders are thought of. Whereas the first time it was like my first time in treatment, I was just so depressed. Like I think it was like more depression than eating disorder, and like the not eating was almost a major symptom of the depression.
I see. And I want to back up for a second. Like it strikes me as very fascinating that your grandmother passes, which is a trauma, and then it sort of escalates. I'm very like, what do you think about that? Because what I'm taking from that is like, you almost needed, and don't let me put words into your mouth, but like it's fascinating to me because like I know that for me, like when I was in the sort of the throes of like wanting to experience my anorexia, wanting to be in it, I almost looked for reasons to continue, reasons to, like just validation for like my bad behavior, right? And I wonder if with your grandmother, there's a little bit of that there, like where you experience like a real trauma and you're like, okay, now I have even more reasons to go down this road. Is there any truth there?
No, not for me. I don't think so.
Okay.
I think I got really depressed, and I think it felt, I don't know that it would have had that same impact if I wasn't there the moment that she died. There was something about being in that hospital room when it happened that was very traumatic for me.
Yeah.
And I really think I became really depressed and I lost my appetite. And then I liked the attention that I was getting for not eating.
Right.
But I don't think it was, the second time, like when I relapsed, I understand what you're saying and I agree, like for me then. But I think this first time it really wasn't. It was about being depressed, losing my appetite, liking the intention. And then, I think witnessing that made me feel very out of control.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do in that moment when your grandmother's on that bed and taking her last breath.
Yeah.
There's just like, you can't be more helpless. There's nothing you can do. And I feel like it helped me feel like I was just like more in control maybe. Because at the time, actually, do you know anything about yoga?
Yeah.
So at the time I had just started doing yoga and the only yoga I was doing was Bikram yoga, which is really hot, very intense, but it's the exact same. It's the same poses in the same order for the same amount of time, every single class. And I think that I loved it. And I think it was because like that also felt like I was in control.
Yeah.
So I think I was seeking, I think the false sense of control was making me feel better. Like, okay, I'm keeping myself together because I'm being able to focus on this kind of control when really I felt very out of control. It was a facade. I was not actually in control. I was depressed. I wasn't going to class. I was crying all of the time. I was a mess. But I think that the eating disorder, the anorexia, and like Bikram yoga really made me feel like, okay, at least I know I can control my food, and I know that the 90 minutes I'm in this yoga studio, I know exactly what I'm going to get.
Yeah.
So I think it was more about that. Like I said, the second time it presented itself very differently. But the first time it was like, and the first time I was in rehab, like all I did was cry. It was just like I was so depressed. It was crazy. I was so depressed.
When you went the first time to Renfrew, and it's the Renfrew Center of Philadelphia.
Yeah, I was in the Philadelphia one. Mm-hmm.
When you went there the first time, and you sort of being depressed, like did you talk to therapists about your depression? Were you being treated?
I was definitely being treated. They were giving me medication. It wasn't really working because like when you're not eating what you need to be eating, your body stops functioning the way it's supposed to. And so I don't think that the medicine they were giving me, like my body was breaking down. My psychiatrist at one point was like, I can't give you, like, you're on the dosage they had me on something. She was like, this should knock you out. She was like, the fact that you're not only saying you don't feel anything on it, but that you're like able to function on it made her believe that like my body wasn't actually like I was taking the medicine and then it was just being eliminated and my body wasn't actually breaking it down. So they were giving me medicine, but the first time that I was in treatment, I did a lot of art therapy and a lot of crying. Like that's kind of how I felt. Like I didn't feel like I had the words to really talk about what needed to be talked about.
Yeah.
I didn't, even if I wanted to talk about it, like I didn't even know where to begin.
Sure.
And
how old were you at that point when the first time?
20.
Okay.
Yeah, I was 20.
Yep.
But I did a lot of art therapy there.
And that painting and things?
Yeah, they had a woman who was the art therapist, who I actually think is still there. Her name is Sandra. And painting, drawing, collaging. I mean, she always you would go to art therapy and she would have a prompt for the day. Like we all did the same thing. It wasn't just like free art room.
Gotcha.
But I did a lot of that. And I think that was helpful. And that was something that I took with me after treatment. I ended up buying like a big drawing book and a bunch of oil pastels. And like, I think that's something that I kind of kept up with. Not anymore, but when I left Renfrew the first time, I kept up with that. But the art therapy made the biggest difference. There was a couple of counselors that I really felt like I connected with. And so I would talk to them, but I still don't think I don't think I knew what I was even talking about. Like I just felt like I didn't have the words, but I think Renfrew felt like a space for me to at least feel what I needed to feel. Like I just remember crying a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. It just, you weren't ready to talk about it yet, or you didn't have the words.
I just don't think it was even processed yet You know, it was like the emotional impact was there, but I don't think my brain, like I think the first time Renfrew helped me sort of process so that the second time that I went, I talked a lot, you know, but the first time I was there, it was just, I wasn't ready to leave when I left. And that's why I relapsed. I knew I wasn't ready to leave, but you know, insurance only lets you stay certain places for a certain amount of time. At some point you've got to go.
Yeah. So even during that first time when you were there, did you use the word eating disorder to yourself?
Yeah, I knew I had an eating disorder for sure. Yeah, I definitely knew I had anorexia.
I see.
I wasn't in denial about that, but I don't think it was like, I just don't think there was a lot of calculation going on.
Got it. And so when you left, what did the relapse look like?
I went to Renfrew's day treatment program first. So I was there 4 days a week. You would go for breakfast and lunch, and then you would do like group therapy and stuff like that. There was other people in your day treatment program. Then I moved to IOP, which is 3 nights a week, and you eat dinner there and you do therapy groups. It was not helping me. They knew it wasn't helping me. So they ended up transferring me to a different treatment program called the Koch Center because they thought that DBT would help me, dialectical behavioral therapy. And at the time, Renfrew wasn't doing that. They do now, but at the time they weren't. So they transferred me to this different place that had DBT, and I did that 4 times a week, a few days and a few nights a week. But I just felt like I knew I wasn't, like my weight was okay. Like my weight was stable. I was following a meal plan, but I knew I wasn't better. And I knew, like, having now gotten better, you know, and really knowing what recovery looked like at that time, I just feel like I was like being held together by like glue and Scotch tape. Like, I don't think, there wasn't like an effort in my part to actually get better.
Yeah. There's a difference between sort of, and I relate to this, going through the motions of like, okay, I'll follow your set of rules, you know, because that is a structure, and I'll eat your thing, but emotionally, mentally, like very much is a different thing.
100%. And so eventually they let me go back to college. I went to Ithaca College. And literally the moment that I got back, it was just full on eating disorder. Like, and this time it was anorexia. It was trying to get my weight down, but it was also, I don't know that I would say it was bulimic, because there wasn't really binging, but there was a lot of purging, and a lot of using exercise and laxative, like everything you can think of, you know, to lose weight. I was trying diet, like all of diet pills, all of that.
And were you still getting the attention then?
No. I mean, at that point, everybody knew I had an eating disorder. And I think that they were...
How did they know? It was just obvious physically?
Well, you mean like my relapse? How did they know?
I mean,
they all knew I left college to go to eating disorder.
Oh, they did.
My friends knew that for sure. Like my college friends knew, like, you left to go to eating disorder. Like 100%.
Gotcha.
So I think when I came back, I don't know if they felt like they were walking on eggshells, but I don't know that they knew that I was like spiraling as fast as I was spiraling.
How could they, you know?
Yeah, but I also think they probably knew something was going on. I had really great friends in college, and I lived with them, you know, so it's like, it's really hard to hide a lot of the stuff that I was doing, even though I tried. Yeah. But I only ended up being able to stay there for January to like 2 months before I had to go back into rehab. Like, it was a very, very fast spiraling relapse.
Did you drop a bunch of weight during that period?
I did a ton of weight, and I was purging a lot.
Yeah.
And I wanted to go back to Renfrew. Like, I remember I got a new therapist the second when I went back to Ithaca. Her name was Karen. I really liked her. And I remember at one point, like, being like, I want to go back. Like, it was so different than the first time, you know, like the first time was just, I think, a coping mechanism that became anorexia. But the second time it was like, I was so out of control, and I felt that, you know, the first time I think I thought I was in control, but I really wasn't. But the second time, like, I was on my life was a disaster. Like that's what it felt like. Like my days were just wake up. I mean, my days were ridiculous.
It rules your life.
I mean, it was just, there was nothing else. And I felt that. And it was like, wake up, eat the little thing that I think is appropriate, purge, go to class, eat the little thing that I think is appropriate, purge, and then I would just lay in bed for hours because I had no energy, but I couldn't sleep. I mean, it was just, it was terrible. I was miserable.
Yeah.
And so I asked to go back the second time. And they called and they got me back, and that it was very different the second time around. Like the entire process, the eating disorder, the recovery, all of that was so different the second time around. It was just I was so out of control, and I didn't even think I was in control at that point. I knew I was out of control.
And it's interesting, this self-awareness that you have, because, I know that certainly I was miserable, and certainly I was suffering and in so much pain during sort of the height of my anorexia. But also it was empowering and invigorating, and in a way it felt great.
Yeah, I mean, I think I felt that too. In like small ways, like there was the part of the eating disorder part of me that like got a little bit of an ego boost when I thought I could eat a lot less than everybody else. Like that lived there. The dropping weight on the scale, that made me feel really powerful. But I think that like I was just so out of control. Like when I think about my days with my eating disorder, that when I went back to college, I mean, they were awful. I just remember them being so bad. They were just bad days.
Yeah.
That I don't have good memories from those few months back at school.
Okay. And how was your second time different? Like, obviously you chose to go and you had a bit more clearer mind, but what did it look like day to day differently?
In treatment?
Yeah.
I think I just talked a lot more, to my therapist. I think I've always been self-reflective, and so I think I had a sense of what was going on. And I feel like the veil of my grandmother's death had been lifted the first time that I was there. And so it was like, I was more aware of what was actually going on with the eating disorder. And I think I remember talking to counselors a lot, talking to my therapist a lot. I did almost no art therapy that time. And there was a big desire to actually get better at that point. Like not just to like get out of treatment and do the same old, but like actually get better.
And was this an inpatient program the second time?
Yeah, it was Renfrew, Philadelphia again.
Okay.
I went back to the same place, almost exactly 1 year later.
And what, like, I've never been, I never did inpatient care for my anorexia. What does that look like? Because I've heard people sort of describe those experiences. I've seen some of it in movies, but like, are you sort of eating with everyone as a group? You have like group therapy? Like, how does the day go? I
can only really speak about Renfrew, but I imagine other ones are similar at least. Renfrew is a pretty big one. There's like 40 something women there. They have a level system. There's 5 levels, and this was 11 years ago. So also what I'm saying right now, just for the people that are it might not be the same.
Got it.
But when I went, there were 5 levels. You came in on a certain level that was basically just decided medically on how stable you were. If you were so medically unstable that you needed to be on bed rest or partial bed rest, which meant like you weren't really allowed to even walk, they'd walk you around in a wheelchair. Or if you were allowed to go in on level 3, which was sort of like the middle level. The lower, like the levels 1, 2, and 3, you did have to eat. You ate as a group. You picked your menu out in the beginning of the week and they gave you a tray for each meal. You had to eat everything that was on the tray. If you didn't, you had to drink a supplement because they needed to get a certain amount of calories in you. Your meal plan was also based on your weight and how medically stable you were. So there were people that had to eat different portions, and it just had to do with, how medically, I don't even think it was necessarily 100% about their weight, but really about their body function.
Yeah.
And then there's group therapy, a lot of group therapy, a lot of individual therapy, psychiatry. You would have several nutrition sessions a week. And then, if you start progressing, then you get to move up the levels, which means then you have more of a say in what you eat, more of a choice in what you eat. You have less counselors around during meal times because they're trusting that you're doing what you need to be doing. When I went there, I know it's different now, but when I went to Renfrew, there was 2 buildings. There was the Renfrew house, which we called the Pink House because it was pink, and then like the regular residential building. And like when I was there, the people that they saw that were really putting the effort in, they moved to the Renfrew house so that we were kind of only among people that were also working really hard at their recovery.
There's like a community.
Rather than being around a bunch of people that didn't actually want to get better. It's hard to get better when you're surrounded by people that are trying to sabotage their own recovery.
Right.
And then once you got to the Renfrew house, you also had a lot more freedoms. The more freedom you got to go out. You could go out to dinner, like into the town and go out to dinner. Like they would let you go to the mall shopping. Like, so you were, there was just a level system, and depending on if you were getting to where you needed to be medically, weight-wise, and then also behaviorally, you would move up or down the levels, and then you got more freedom based on that, or less freedom.
And were you at this point just like, I'm going to be a star student, I'm ready for recovery?
Yeah, I did really well. I mean, I did really well the first time too, and I do think that was part of my perfectionism. Like, I did want to be the perfect patient, which I know is a thing for certain people. Like some of the people that are listening might know exactly what I'm talking about. Like I didn't break the rules. Like one homework that a counselor gave me was like, could you just break a rule at some point? Like you don't go break a rule, go do something, go
Were you
eat
able
something
to break a rule?
I mean, sort of, I don't know. It was weird because it was like a homework. So I felt like I had to do it, but so there was that for sure. So I did well in treatment the first time around too, but this time there was just like the first time I left because I had to leave. The second time I remember being like, I'm ready to go now. Like I had been there for a month and I was like 10 or 6 weeks, I think. And I was like I could go now. You could send me home. And when I went home, I didn't do IOP or day treatment. I did have a therapist and a nutritionist and a psychiatrist. So I had like an outpatient treatment team, but I didn't go to anything like very structured. There was just a huge shift. I just was ready to do it.
Yeah.
And not like I didn't falter, and stumble and like have times when I wasn't ready to do it, but there was a different boost in my motivation to get better.
Sure.
Though I will say, to what you were saying before, like when things would happen to give you a reason to relapse, like I definitely remember that happening several times after I got out of rehab the second time. Like, oh, this guy that I really like blew me off. Now I don't have, this is a good reason to not eat tonight.
Sure.
I do remember that, but I also remember just feeling like I knew that was ridiculous at that point. So I would do it, but my therapist would call me on it and she'd be like, what was the purpose of that? And I'd be like, you're right. There was none. It wasn't actually making me feel better to not eat dinner that night.
Yeah. So after you leave Renfrew the second time, how old are you at that point?
21. Okay.
So the next 10 years leading, or 11 years, you said you're 32. Yeah. What does your recovery look like?
I knew I couldn't go back to Ithaca. So I transferred to Seton Hall University, which is a local school, and I was able to live at home because I just couldn't afford to have what had happened the last time I went back happen again. Mm-hmm. And I knew that was the right decision. No one had to fight me to do that. I was 100% okay with that. And I still did really well in school. That's when I really started to get deeper into yoga again. After Bikram and being in treatment, I didn't do yoga for a couple of years because I couldn't, I wasn't really allowed to. So when I went to Seton Hall, I joined a gym and I started doing yoga there. And that was huge for me. I I got a job. Like I just felt like things were starting to get like I was living more of a normal life.
Yeah.
But I do think that the yoga was the biggest thing because I started going to a gym. Some gyms have like really awful yoga, but at the time, this gym had like really great yoga teachers. And I just think it very slowly started to get me to have a different relationship with my body, and the part of me that liked to not eat and then step on the scale and see the progress that I made was able to see progress in a different way, like being able to do an arm balance that I didn't used to be able to do, or, to feel like I could hold a pose for longer than maybe I used to be able to hold the pose. And so I think in some ways it was doing what anorexia had been doing for me, but, in a more positive way. And I ended up starting to go to a yoga studio instead of a gym, which had a really awesome community. I'm still very good friends with most of the people that I met there 11 years ago. I started working there for free yoga because I was a college student and I couldn't really afford all the yoga that I was doing. I think in the beginning I was sort of addicted to yoga too. Like I do think I kind of did way too much of it.
Do you have an addictive personality?
I don't think I do anymore.
Yeah.
But I do think, maybe. I haven't had like any signs of that show up for, 10 years.
Sure.
But I do think in the beginning, like I was doing several yoga classes every single day. Like it was a lot of yoga. But I think my treatment team was a little bit more patient with weaning me off of that than they were with my eating disorder,
Yeah.
So I think that helped a lot. I got certified to be a teacher almost 10 years ago. But the biggest thing, and I've said this in my podcast and every time I tell my story, was more about, it was actually the first time in my life that I felt part of something, like I was saying, for my whole schooling, I felt out of place.
Yeah.
And I felt like at this yoga studio, I felt like I was part of it. I had friends. I worked the front desk. People knew me. I knew them. Like we would go out. I had it was just, some of my best friends today I met there and they're still my best friends today. And I think more than anything, that was the biggest piece in my recovery, was like having a group of people that I felt like I was actually a part of, that, they weren't like the best, most healthy people in the world, but they didn't have eating disorders, So like if I went out to dinner with them, like it wasn't okay for me not to eat dinner.
Did they
it wasn't,
know you had an eating disorder?
Yeah, I think I think I was open about that,
Yeah.
which was helpful. I always say to my clients, you're only as sick as your secrets, so like, because they knew that, like I couldn't go to dinner and not eat dinner.
Yeah.
They would stop asking me to go with them.
Yeah.
And I didn't want that. I wanted to be their friends. I wasn't loving it. So I think that really helped me have even more of a desire to really get better, because I didn't want to lose what I had found.
Right. And it's such a great lesson in the power of community, and then specifically in yoga, the power of like just kind of seeing what our bodies are capable of. Like there's such a great, especially for people who've had struggles with their body, a thing like yoga can be such a grounding experience in sort of getting to know what our bodies can do.
Yep. It's a completely, I think that there's a lot of unhealthy people in the yoga world. Like I will say that, like, I think a lot of eating disorders hide in yoga as veganism and gluten, dairy, sugar free and all of that. Not that some people aren't doing it for different reasons, but I do think that there's a very unhealthy side of Western yoga right now. But I also think that like if you find the right studio and the right group, and I don't think it needs to be yoga. I think if you find a group of people that you really connect with and feel like you belong in, it doesn't necessarily need to be yoga, I also think there's something to be said about finding something you love to do with your body, whether it's yoga or running or singing or playing the drums or gardening or painting, finding a way to appreciate your body for what it's allowing you to do.
Yeah.
Which again could be yoga, but doesn't have to be yoga. But I
Right.
think so many of us objectify our own bodies. And when we find something that we love that our body allows us to do, it shifts that, now we actually appreciate and respect our own bodies rather than also objectify it.
Yeah.
But I will say, one thing I want to say is like, one thing that I know I struggled with for most of my life, I've gotten a lot better at it now, is boundaries. And so the group of friends that I found at that yoga studio, while I am still friends with them now, there was like almost 2 years that I didn't talk to them, because I wasn't respecting their boundaries. And they had to cut me off, which was really hard. But one of the ways that I knew that I really didn't have an eating disorder anymore, because that would have been the perfect excuse to relapse, and I didn't.
Yeah.
And, time heals wounds, maybe not all wounds, but wounds. And a lot of us are really good friends again. And I don't think I really struggle with that quite as much anymore. But it wasn't like, oh, I found yoga, and then it was all like rainbows and unicorns and everything was fine for the next 10 years. It's like, that didn't happen. Like, even though the eating disorder had gone away, sort of, there was still a lot of stuff for me to have to deal with mentally, depression and anxiety, and not being able to set my own boundaries, but also not being able to respect other people's boundaries. And that took a long time, even after the eating disorder sort of stopped showing its face.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of that's resolved now, but that didn't all just go away because I found yoga.
Sure, of course. When you experience or sort of see or witness to kind of the unhealthy stuff that you're referring to, in the yoga world, in the health space, in the fitness space, you see it everywhere. How does that make you feel? Does it trigger you? How does it make you feel?
It doesn't. Nothing like that triggers me now. Like, it doesn't bother me to see that at all. It makes me, it depends. If I see that in somebody and I know that they're really trying to get better, it makes me very like motherly, and like, I want to help them because I can see myself in them. If I see someone that I feel like that's happening with and they're very not willing to do anything about it, I guess I feel like sort of like, oh, I wish they would. But I think largely in the yoga world, it frustrates me.
Yeah.
Like, not on a one-to-one, these are my students basis, but like in what the yoga world is largely putting out there of like skinny white women doing ridiculous things with their body and calling that yoga, even though so many of them probably do have major body image and eating stuff, that makes me angry.
Yeah.
That I think is harmful. I don't think that that's helping anything. I think that's really harmful. And the teachers that go out there and preach, like, you can't eat this, you shouldn't eat that, you need to, like, I think that there's a lot of harm that can also be done, and is being done by like mainstream yoga media. Though I will say that there's a lot out there now that's really working on countering that. But I think that there's a lot messed up in the yoga world right now.
And I see that. I see that everywhere. I mean, you see it on Instagram a lot. What are you doing personally, in your business, in your yoga practice, to counteract that stuff?
A few things. I feel like when I teach, I try to be really sensitive about the things that I say. So like, I'll never go into a yoga room and be like, we're going to do chaturangas today because summer season's coming up and you're going to be on the beach. Like, I'll never say shit like that because it's ridiculous. But teachers do. Like, I've heard that before.
Yeah. You got to get those summer abs.
Exactly. I'll take a sip of water.
Yeah. It's not triggering to me at all anymore, but it makes me sad. It makes me upset a little, because I do, these people and I'm painting with a broad brush here, but they're, they have a huge following of people, and they're they're selling sort of diet shakes, or they're
Right.
they're the image that they're presenting is
Their
such
cleanses and all of these things that they're
cleanses and pristine. Like there's all of
and
these, it's gross. I don't like it.
yeah, and really that's where like orthorexia. That's why I mean orthorexia is just like I mean, it's so similar to every other eating disorder. It's just like, this is what you're being fed now. You're not told to go on a fad diet necessarily, but you are told you should only eat kale and like turmeric, and that you should never eat all of these other things. I mean, I just think it's dangerous. And so I think first in my studio, I'm really careful about the words that I use as a teacher. It's interesting running a studio now because I know because I'm so outspoken about my eating disorder, like I know there are students that have told me that they have one, and I see them come into my studio. And so it's even more important to me to be really mindful of the way that I speak. And it's also really important to me to make sure that my staff is speaking in a way that I feel okay with. And I actually had to have a conversation with them once because there was just conversation going on in my studio, which like, if you don't have an eating disorder, was just like fine conversation, about some diet that one of them is doing and, not eating something. And like, I knew that there were students there that had told me that they had an eating disorder. And so once the students left, I said to my staff, I was like, look, you didn't say anything wrong. Like they weren't saying anything wrong. They were having a normal conversation of people that don't have eating disorders, and aren't sensitive to eating disorders, in talk.
Yeah.
But I said to them, because of how outspoken I am, because I have a podcast, I know that there are students that come here that have eating disorders and struggle with this stuff. And it's not okay in my studio to have conversations like that. And they totally understood. Like they felt really bad. But again, they just didn't know because they weren't like, it was just a normal conversation for a lot of other people.
Yeah, totally.
But, because I've been through it, I'm hyper aware of that. And so I try really hard to make sure that everything that's being spoken about in my studio isn't about food and body size. I also purposely try to have a diverse teaching staff, that aren't all like thin white women. I think that's important.
Yeah.
So to have different genders, different body types, different races on my staff, I think is important so that students feel like there's someone that like is speaking for them. One of the other things that drives me crazy with the yoga world right now is it's getting not just yoga, coaching too, and wellness in general. It's becoming so expensive. And because it's becoming so expensive, it's becoming very segregated. And unless you've got a lot of money, you really can't go to yoga that much in a studio because like in New Jersey, they're charging $25 a yoga class.
Wow.
And you can't become a yoga teacher because they're charging $4,000 for a teacher training, and if you don't have $4,000 or $25 for a class, like you're now not able to really practice yoga. And to me, that's upsetting. So like I've tried to price my studio a lot less than the other local studios. I also have it's called a community yoga bank. So like it's kind of a pay it forward thing where other students have paid for classes to be put in this bank. So if someone wants to take a class and they can't afford it, they can take one of the prepaid classes.
Oh, that's so great. I love that.
Yeah. And my teacher training is going to be a slight, like a tiered pricing structure because and we have like yoga in Spanish. Like I'm trying to make sure that people can take my teacher training that are of all different backgrounds, because I think it's important to have all different voices in a yoga studio. And so part of it is being like body conscious, and the words that we're saying and welcoming to all body types and not just sizes, but also like, I've got students that got into car accidents or like are recovering from cancer and have neuropathy or, people have limitations that you would never really even maybe know by looking at them, but it still makes them feel like they can't do yoga anymore because they can't stand on their hands and get their foot to their head and all of these things. And so I'm hoping my studio is not portraying that. Like on my Instagram, I will never put a picture of like a skinny white person, including myself, in a ridiculous yoga posture that's unattainable for 99% of humans. Like, I just won't do it. I refuse. And so I hope that I'm playing my part, but I also know that like I am coming from this perspective of like, I'm a thinner bodied white person. And so I also try to be really open to the diverse teaching staff that I have and to the diverse client base that I have of ways that like I can do things differently if I might think that I am, but I don't know. Yeah. So I also try to be as open-minded and take as much feedback as I can, because I'm also aware of like, I am sort of the living stereotype of what the yoga world is pushing out there, and it's just based on the way that I look.
Sure.
But I understand that. So I feel like I need to make sure that I'm checking myself all of the time too.
I think that's all you can do. And it's the best thing you can do. 'Cause like we have to recognize our place in the world, our privilege, and have an open heart and create an inclusive community and allow for all different types of body types, perspectives, etc. Like that's how we become better humans, creating those little pockets of inclusivity.
Totally. And I actually find that that's happening in the eating disorder recovery world now too, thank God, because for a while it was like no one would believe you had anorexia if you weren't in a smaller body.
Yep.
And it's like you can be any body size and still have and suffer from anorexia, but like they'll only send you to treatment if you're under a certain amount of weight, and that's ridiculous, and
it's problematic.
For a lot of treatment facilities will only take women, where it's like men also struggle, and where do they get to go?
Right.
And there's this perception that like people of color don't struggle with eating disorders, which is also not true. But I feel like there's a shift, like health at every size, for example. Like I think that there is a shift happening, just as it's happening in the yoga world. I also think it's happening in the eating disorder recovery world, that a lot of people are now speaking out about how wrong that is and how that's making people not be able to get help, either because they can't afford it or because no one's actually recognizing that they have a problem, purely based on the way that they look.
Right. I mean, I'm glad to hear that there's a shift, and I've seen that shift myself, and it gives me hope. Because you're right. I think there's so much value placed on the appearance of things in so many facets of life. Right. I was just talking to my friend Liv Pinelli, who, her whole story, not her whole story, but her whole sort of like addiction and sort of eating disorder journey was all about her trying to figure out like who, like her sense of worth. What is her sense of worth? And like growing up, she learned like, she learned from sort of her mother, for instance, like, worth is in losing weight, and then that leads to getting a man, and like there's so much tied up in this what we are perceived to be, but like what matters is the heart and the mind and that stuff.
And what matters is like how you feel. Like that's what I try to get across to my clients is like, when you're in recovery from an eating disorder, you might gain weight, you might lose weight, you might not, nothing might happen with your weight, but do you actually feel better? That's actually, to me, what recovery is. Like, are you getting to a place where you feel better? Your body is functioning well. You have energy. Yeah. You're able to think clearly. Like, you're not consumed by these thoughts about food and weight and calories and all of that. Like, do you feel okay? And I think that we live in a world where it's like, do you look the way that you should look? And I think that I see shifts happening, and that, like you said, it gives me hope.
Yeah.
The first episode of my second season of my podcast, I was interviewing a woman who is an eating disorder therapist, and she's like kind of a well-known Instagram eating disorder therapist, but she's amazing and I love her. And we were talking about how, like, one of the reasons why I think the shift is happening is because a lot of people that had eating disorders are now entering the treatment field, whereas the treatment providers of 10 to 20 years ago doesn't mean they didn't struggle, but it was like forbidden to be able to say that you had an eating disorder in the past. Like no treatment provider would ever admit to it.
Right.
But I think now the voices of today's recovery world are people who suffered and were aware of how ridiculous some of these things are. And now we have different voices that are saying, like I had anorexia, but I wasn't in a smaller body and nobody believed me.
Right.
For a long time, binge eating disorder wasn't even classified as an eating disorder, and now it is. And so I think that the new voices in the recovery field are a lot more empathetic and speaking from personal experience, and bringing a lot more awareness to, people did their best, in the past treatment providers all did their best. I'm not saying that they all were wrong. But eating disorder research is a very new thing. And I think we're making a lot of headway of like what works, what doesn't work, and not just in treatment modalities, but just in general of how we portray these things, in the media and in magazines, and stopping glorifying certain eating disorders and stopping shaming others, and all of those kinds of things. I think that that's all starting to come to the surface. And there's a lot of great people talking about it now.
Hell yeah. So great to hear. I do want to talk about, I do actually have a couple of questions. Let's get to the questions real quick. I have a couple of questions from You Me Empathy listeners. This one is from Jacqueline. She says, if you're in recovery yourself, what do you do to take care when you feel overwhelmed?
Well, I actually say that I'm recovered. Like I don't say that I'm in recovery, which is sort of like there's like a debate in the eating disorder world of if that's like okay or not. I'm of the side of, I think you can be recovered. And I do say that I am. I think that when I'm overwhelmed now, one of the greatest things that I've learned both in recovery, but also just in yoga is like the ability to pause and respond instead of react. And I think when I was living in my eating disorder brain, I would react to every emotion in an eating disordered way. And now it's like, if I'm not feeling okay, I don't react right away. Like I'm able to take a day where it's like, hey, I know that I'm not feeling okay, and that's okay. And, I'll go see my friend, or at least I'll let a friend know that I'm not having a good day. I'm an introvert, right? So like I'll sit on my couch and like watch a ridiculous television show with my cats, and that makes me feel better. I'll go take a walk outside. But I also have to say, like, my moods they don't fluctuate like crazy anymore because I feel like I'm a lot more stable.
Yeah.
So I feel like when I'm overwhelmed, it's not like what it used to be where it felt unbearable, because I'm feeding myself well. And because I've gotten to this place of like, my mood doesn't go so up. And so, I mean, my mood never went so up, but like as down as it can go.
Right.
Overwhelmed doesn't feel as big and paralyzing to me anymore. But I do think I reach out to people. I think that's the biggest thing. I also think giving yourself permission to pause and just like take a day where you cry and you feel like crap. And that's okay. One thing that my teacher says is you've got to let your emotions actually move through you rather than get stuck inside of you. Mm-hmm. So if I feel really overwhelmed, like when I was opening this yoga studio, like it was so stressful. And there was a time where we couldn't do any more interior work until a permit came through. And I found out that the permit couldn't come through because there was something wrong with the architecture plans. And I was so stressed out because the architecture cost me like $1,400. The architect cost me like $1,400. I needed to open, but no one would tell me what the problem was. So I didn't know if it was going to be like an $1,000 fix or like a $20 fix. Like I had no idea.
Yeah.
I was super overwhelmed. I was super stressed out. I was very emotional. I went to take a yoga class that my best friend was teaching. Before class, she was like, "How are you?" And I was like, "Don't even ask me because I can't hold it together if I tell you." I took yoga. I cried on the yoga mat. After class, she's like, "Do you feel better?" I was like, "I don't. And if you ask me, I'm going to start crying." I went into my car and cried. She followed me out. I told her what was going on. I was like a wreck in my car. She said, be sweet to yourself today. I like canceled any kind of responsibilities I had that day. I sat on my couch with my cats. I watched a ridiculous television show all day, and I gave myself that time to like let it out and feel it, because I feel like so many of our eating disorder symptoms we're trying not to feel those things.
Yeah.
We get overwhelmed, and so we binge or we purge or we restrict or we self-harm or we do all of these other things because we're afraid to actually feel that. And I'm not afraid to feel those things anymore. I know that those are normal, so I gave myself that day of being a wreck, an emotional disaster that day. But I cried. I didn't do anything harmful. And I canceled everything, and I gave myself a day of sitting on my couch and doing nothing. Now, I'm an introvert. That works for me. If you're an extrovert, maybe you wouldn't do that. You might not cancel your day. You might like call all of your friends to go out to dinner because you want to be among people that you love.
Yep.
So I think we all deal with things in different ways, and people have to figure out what ways works for them. And hopefully therapy is helping them learn that. But when I'm overwhelmed, I let myself feel overwhelmed. I don't react. I pause, and I give myself permission to take a day off if I have to, and that's actually something that I feel like my mom did really well when I was younger. Like if I was having an emotional day, she would just let me stay home from school. Like there wasn't a fight. Like you have to suck it up, go to school. Like she was like, fine. Like you cried all morning. Who knows why? Because you're 13 and you've got hormones. Like take the day off. Like it doesn't matter. And I think that that's something I really appreciate that she did when I was younger. Like to me, it's like if you've got to take a day off because your emotions are creating havoc inside, like give yourself that day to feel it. Don't suck it up and then have to go to work and like go to school and then just try to stuff them down. Now, obviously, some people have to go to work. They can't take the day off, but like give yourself permission to feel it when you can feel it,
That's great. That's all so great.
It's like I liken it to like when you shake up a carbonated beverage, like you got to let yourself slowly unwind the cap. But if you don't do that and then you just keep shaking it, and then so at some point the carbonation can't stay there anymore, the cap just pops off and now you've exploded. You've got to like be sweet to yourself. And so like when I'm feeling overwhelmed, because I let myself feel it, it doesn't like, it's not like 3 weeks of pent up overwhelm that's now wreaking havoc in my life. It's like, all right, I'm just going to take this day because I feel like crap, and I'm going to let myself feel it so that it doesn't get stuffed down. And then the next day of overwhelm gets stuffed down on top of it. And then the next day gets stuffed on top of it until I've got a day where I'm out of control. Like that just doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah. It's perfect advice. I love that. And yes, feel your feels, listeners. Also, like what has helped me, I know, is figuring out the things that ground me, like figuring out those things that like really truly kind of bring me back to myself. Like nature is one for me that really helps me when I'm feeling overwhelmed, or walking or just sitting out in nature can be very grounding for me. Just so like, I think finding things that really kind of bring you back to yourself and allow you, maybe the mental clarity to kind of sit with those feelings.
I also think using your voice is important. Like I remember for myself, I would feel so bad, but I wouldn't ask for help, and I wouldn't tell people that I felt so bad either, because I was afraid of being a burden or I was afraid of being too much. But then I would get upset that no one was asking me how I was feeling. And then I would get angry and be like, nobody cares about me because no one cares how I feel. And it's like, now it's like, if I feel like crap, I text my best friend. I'm like, I'm having a bad day. And then she and I can talk about it. Or even if we don't talk about it, at least I know I told somebody about it. There's a recognition of it. But I think for me, learning to use my voice was really huge in my recovery. And it's still huge today, and that's still something that I probably I still work on with myself, is like asking for what I need when I need it, rather than thinking I can just like white knuckle it all the time. Especially opening a business, like it's having to ask people for help.
Yeah.
Like I need help. I'm too busy today, or I'm so overwhelmed. I just need a day. Like, is it okay if I don't come in? Can you work the front desk today? Like, but I think also learning how to tell people that you're not okay, rather than hoping that they guess it and then being upset that no one guessed it.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I do have one more question here. This one's from Angela. She says, how does someone lose weight that's impacting health without triggering old eating disorder issues?
I would definitely get a therapist and nutritionist. I don't think that's something to be done alone, like on your own. I also think that the focus should always be on your underlying health issues, not on your weight. So like if your goal is to lower your cholesterol, then the focus should be on lowering your cholesterol, not necessarily on losing the weight. And maybe the doctor's telling you like part of doing that is losing weight. Like maybe, I don't know, just a hypothetical, but I don't think that's depending on how far you are in recovery. I think that is something that should be done with the guidance of a therapist and a nutritionist and a doctor that understands eating disorders, not just like a GP that's like lose weight and everything will heal itself. Because I don't know that that's always true. But okay. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that on your own. And I also think that, and I say this to my clients all the time, it's like, it's about, the goal should be your health, not necessarily your weight loss. And the goal should be on feeling healthy, not getting thinner. And the goal should be feeling good, and functioning well, not just, I think our medical world focuses so much on weight loss as the cure-all for everything.
Right.
And I think for someone with an eating disorder, that can be really dangerous territory. And I wouldn't navigate that myself if I was still very newly in recovery.
Okay. No, that's great.
Even now, like when I go to the doctor, like I don't look at my weight. I don't care. Not that I think if I saw my weight, it would trigger a relapse and I would have a terrible day and I wouldn't I don't think it would do anything, but to me, my health, is separate from my weight. And I think it's important to find a doctor that doesn't automatically link your weight and your health. That being said, like, sure, some medical things, maybe losing weight will help, but I don't think you do that alone.
Yeah, 100%.
I think it's very dangerous territory. It's like if you have a drug addiction and someone's prescribing you a pain medicine, like you better do that under the guidance of a therapist.
Yeah. Oh, great. I do want to, actually tell me about like how you became a recovery coach, because I'm very intrigued by that process and what all goes into that.
So first of all, I think anybody can call themselves a coach, which I actually think is sort of not a good thing. Like you don't go to college and like have to pass a test to be able to call yourself a recovery coach, a health coach, a life coach, like whatever. Anybody can really call themselves that. The woman that, where do I begin? The woman that's like my main yoga mentor, her name's Kobe. I mentioned her before. She runs a program called Quarter Life Calling for people in their 20s that feel lost. And I took that when I was 26. And I was still like really depressed. This is when like I had just stopped talking to that friends group that really helped me so much in my recovery. And I was feeling lost, but I wasn't using eating disorder symptoms, but I wasn't really okay. So I took this program with her. It was a week-long program, and she and I really connected. And she ran a life coaching school. It was called Soluna. And at the time, I didn't think that I wanted to be a life coach, but I knew I wanted to work and study with her more. And so I did her life coach training. And I realized that I was actually pretty good at it, at life coaching in general. And when I got certified to be a life coach, I thought that I wanted to be an eating disorder recovery coach, but I took on like 2 clients that had eating disorders, and it's not that I was getting triggered, but I was getting frustrated with them. And I realized that I actually wasn't ready to work with people that had eating disorders yet. Like I wasn't in the, I wish I was there phase, but I was in the just get better phase. Like I wasn't fully, I don't think I was fully ready yet. So I did life coaching, but I didn't work with people that had eating disorders, not on purpose. I just didn't like seek them out. It's not like someone came to me and said they had one and I was like, sorry, I can't work with you. So I had other clients. And I started working for Kobe's coaching school as a mentor and as like the brand operations manager. And I kind of stopped coaching and being like, I don't know that this is actually what I want to do. And then there was one year that I assisted her, and I did tell my story, which she didn't always have the people that worked for her do to the participants. Like, we didn't always be like, and here's my story. But this year in particular, she had. And after I told my story, 2 of the participants in that group came up to me and had confided in me that they were struggling with an eating disorder and asked if I'd coach them. And this was now like 4 years later or 3 years later. And I said, okay, and it was amazing. Like, I felt like I understood where they were. Obviously everybody's story and struggle is different, but I understood more, and I felt like I could empathize. I wasn't getting frustrated. I was patient. And at the same time, though, I was also able to kind of call them on their BS because I had an awareness of the eating disorder mentality, so like one of my clients was like, came to a call one day and she felt like crap. And I was like, well, why do you feel so bad? And she was talking about wanting to lose weight. And like, I was getting a little suspicious. And then she was talking about how she had gone through all of her old Facebook pictures of when she was a lot thinner. And I was like, well, why did you do that? And she was like, well, she was saying it was giving her, like, she was claiming it was making her feel better. And like the part of me that knows the eating disorder mind was like, I call BS on that. That's ridiculous. Like, stop doing that. Like, that's not me. Like, I feel like, I got to this point of where I was able to empathize, but also give a little bit of tough love because their eating disorder couldn't really manipulate me because I knew that mentality already.
Right.
And I felt like we made so much progress working together that I was like, okay, now I feel like I can call myself this. And for a while I was like, I didn't like calling myself a life coach. I didn't like calling myself an eating disorder recovery coach because I just felt like it was very like woo woo, like spiritually like ridiculous. Like, is that really even a career choice?
Yeah.
A very like millennial career choice. And I ended up taking a business coaching group where I was the participant, and it was meant to help life coaches put their business model together. And I had to read a book as part of that, and they were talking about just calling yourself what you are for what you do. And I was like, okay, so I'm going to start marketing myself as an eating disorder recovery coach. I don't call myself a life coach anymore. I'm a recovery coach. And then I found out that there's a woman who's very well known in the eating disorder recovery field named Carolyn Costin. Have you heard of her before?
I have, yeah.
So Carolyn Costin founded Montinito, which is a treatment program that's now like nationwide, but at the time when I was sick was only in California. Carolyn is one of the first outspoken people to say that she had had an eating disorder and she fully recovered. And so I really resonated with her. And she was saying a lot of the things that I was saying, even though I didn't know she was saying them, so she and my wavelength was just similar to hers. And I found out that she has an eating disorder recovery coach program that you can take, like an actual certification program. So I signed up for that, and I have to admit I didn't graduate from it. I did all of the lessons, I did all of the homework, but I never actually took the test. So I can't actually call myself like certified through her program, but those programs do exist, and I did learn a lot from the program. She has 2 different tracks. She's got a track for people that have had an eating disorder and a track for people who have not had an eating disorder. But I did learn a lot from the videos and the readings and the homework that I did, even though I didn't technically graduate because I didn't do the exam or the calls. I got too busy and I just stopped. But now I call myself that, and not every client I have has an eating disorder, but most of them do. And they're at different stages of their recovery. And I sometimes call myself like a paid sponsor. Like when a lot of my friends are in recovery from other things, and I used to get really jealous that they had sponsors, like someone that came before them and got better and like was there for them, to kind of guide them when they were having a hard time. And so I sort of call myself like a sponsor, but with like coach training.
Sure.
And a lot of what I do is specific to what the client needs and where they are. Some of it's very practical, like food journals and, things like that. And like, what are you eating? Where are you going to the store? How is food shopping for you? What are your habits around food? I often require my clients to also have a therapist and a nutritionist. I don't claim to be that. I'm not. But I do think that a coach, right now, at least, coaching has a lot less restrictions because there's not like a organization that like oversees coaches. And because of that, my clients can text me when they're having a hard time and we don't really there's not like a boundary that we're crossing in that way. Whereas a lot of therapists wouldn't do that. I'll be open about my struggles, whereas therapists might not. And a lot of reasons therapists won't are because of like the governing agencies of their state. Other clients, like they are fairly well into their recovery. And so we'll talk a lot more about their values and like, okay, now that your eating disorder's not taking up a lot of your time, what do we fill it with? What do you care about? What are your strengths? Like, do you need to go back to college? Do you want to get a job? Do you need to ask for a raise? Like things that might at one point have caused their eating disorder to act up. We game plan ways of doing it differently. Like one of my clients, like breaking up with her boyfriend. Like she needed to do it. And she, in the past, if she had done that, she would have fallen back into her eating disorder habits, so she and I sort of made a plan around it so that she didn't. But it's a lot, like it's accountability. It's a lot more practical. I don't go into my clients' pasts really at all. It's a lot more about where are you now and where do you want to be. If your past isn't processed, then you also need to be in therapy. I think a coach is a really good addition to a treatment team. A lot of my clients, I talk to their therapists and their nutritionists too, so that we're like a united front. And I can kind of be the practical hand that helps put into motion the goals that the nutritionist is giving them, or the goals that the therapist is giving them.
Gotcha.
So in those are the ways in which I show up as a coach. There's other coaches that like, there's an organization called Recovered Living out there. I don't know if you've heard about that. The woman that runs it's Christy Amadio. I interviewed her on season 1 of my podcast, but like they'll even do live-ins. If you come back from rehab and you're like nervous to live by yourself, they'll send someone to live with you for a couple of weeks.
Oh, wow.
And help you get all of the food that reminds you of your eating disorder or the clothes that remind to like help you clear out your cabinets, and like they'll stay with you. Whereas I'll do that, but it's usually virtual. It's not in person unless I have a client that lives by me, which doesn't happen as often. But yeah, it's coaching in the eating disorder world, I think, is a newer thing, but I do think it's going to be bigger and bigger because I wish I had one.
Yeah.
I wish I had someone when I was really actively trying to get better, that said, I did, and this is how I did it. And like, I understand, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and, recovery is not a straight line. You will relapse, but I'm going to try to hold you accountable to not going all the way back into the hole. Like, text me when you're having a hard time and things like that. I think it's a little bit more peer to peer than like professional to peer, even though I do have one life coaching certification and did a lot of the training for the other.
Right. Well, I think it's so amazing that you're doing that and you're using your own sort of past experience as this. You're on the other side of it now, and you can very deeply empathize, which I think is so neat. Let's talk about Empathy Heroes. This is the part of the show where my guest and I talk about someone in our lives. Could be a character from a book or a movie, just someone in our lives who is just a good, empathetic person. And I will go first to give you, Kristen, a moment to think on that. My empathy hero this week is Charles Darwin. And specifically this quote that he says, quote, "The love for all living creatures is the most noble attribute of man," end quote. And obviously, Charles Darwin, writing The Origin of Species, was very fond of animals and species, and as I am as well. But I think it could be applied to all creatures, meaning humans as well. And I like to live in the framework that love is the reason we're here, and we should love each other and sort of lead with our loving hearts. And so I wanted to just share that quote from my empathy hero, Charles Darwin.
Hmm.
How about you?
I don't really, I can't say that it's like my empathy hero today, but since you shared a quote that helped me a lot in my recovery, and I think that it's a quote that's just good when it comes to growth from anything. It doesn't need to be an eating disorder. Is by Maya Angelou, and it was we did what we knew how to do at the time. When we knew better, we did better. And so I feel like, for me, my eating disorder did serve a purpose. It helped me grieve. It helped me cope. But once I started to get treatment and I started to learn other ways, it started to no longer be an option for me, So it's having empathy, whether for yourself, if you're still struggling with your eating disorder, whatever you might be struggling with. And it's also having empathy for other people who are still in that place.
Yeah.
But the second part of the quote is when you knew better, you did better. Once I started to learn other ways, it was up to me to actually, that's when I would try to do my eating disorder symptoms and I was like, they just don't work anymore. So because I knew a different way, it was no longer acceptable. And I had a therapist tell that to me once, this is no longer acceptable. You know better now. And so, that to me is I used to carry that quote written in my pocket when I was in recovery. You did what you knew how to do at the time. When you knew better, you did better. Because it gave me patience for where I was and where I had been, but it also held me accountable to acting in the ways that I had learned. And so I guess I would say, in the season of sharing quotes, that quote by Maya Angelou was huge for me.
Yeah, I love that. That's an amazing quote. Thanks for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Kristen, where can the listeners listen to your podcast, connect with you, learn more about your eating disorder recovery coaching, all of that lovely stuff? Yeah,
so my eating disorder recovery coaching business is called Always a Being. And it's a play on, people usually saying once an addict, always an addict. I don't know if you've ever heard that before, but I've heard that a lot.
I have, definitely.
And so it's a play on that. And it's not once an addict, always an addict, but you're just a being, once a being, always a being. And that's how I came up with the name of that. And so that's just alwaysabeing.com. And you can find out more about me and you can listen to my podcast on that. My podcast is called Eating Disorder Recovery Speakers. It's also on iTunes podcasts. And basically what I do is I interview people who are either well into their recovery or call themselves recovered. And the first part of the podcast is they share their story uninterrupted. They'll tell a little bit about what it was like to be in the throes of their eating disorder, but they'll also talk more about what helped them get better and what awesome things are going on in their life now that they did. So that's called Eating Disorder Recovery Speakers. That came out of the fact that there weren't really 12-step meetings like my friends got to go to, where there were Monday recovery nights, speaker nights, and every Monday they could go hear it. I didn't have that opportunity. And so this was me hoping to get people's stories out there, because I don't think you hear enough of them, of people in eating disorder recovery who are doing really well. So that's my podcast. Always a Being is my eating disorder website. That's where you can contact me. If you live in North Jersey, my yoga studio is called The Yoga Ground. The website's theyogaground.com. It's in West Orange, New Jersey. If you want to give yoga a try, or if you want to connect in person, come see me. Come look me up, come see me. I've got a few people that have started because they listened to my podcast, and that's how they started coming to my yoga studio.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. But yeah, those are the ways. Theyogaground.com, alwaysabeing.com, Eating Disorder Recovery Speakers on iTunes. If you don't have iTunes, you can listen to it on my website.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing all that.
Yeah, definitely.
And thanks for being a guest on You Me Empathy, Kristen.
Yeah, you're welcome. I was happy to do it.
And to you listeners, I'm here, you're here, we're here together on this wayward, overwhelming, awe-inspiring pale blue dot. We have each other. It's You, Me, Empathy.